Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Smart Talks with the Elizabeth Smart Foundation. I'm Elizabeth Smart. I'm here with my co-host, Mio Strong, and we're very excited today to have Chris Carlson with us. He is a digital strategist and he's a technology consultant. He's built his own company called Human Degree, if you want to look him up. But he has built companies, sold companies, and is a self-proclaimed huge nerd. So very excited to have you with us today. Today we're talking a little bit about how easy it is for predators to contact us and how easy it is for predators to find out where we live and find out our personal details. And I just want to begin with asking you, just how difficult is it?
Well, here's the thing it's really interesting. Anytime we're talking about a digital experience, we have to question what's happening with ourselves in the realms of power. So power is really what we find online in apps, in streams, anywhere you go, is you don't know what you're really up against. Okay, and that's really interesting. So when we talk in terms of war, we talk about power asymmetry, right? And the things we have to be careful about is what we're up against in any of these digital engagements. And so that's kind of the framing that I would say is easiest for most people to approach, and saying, do we really know what we're up against? And so does that kind of frame?
Yeah, well, what are we up against? How do you know?
Well, that's a great question. So I got a story that kind of helps us understand this a little bit. Do you guys remember, maybe like 5-7 years ago, where the internet stopped? Okay. When there was pages that it was like, click to the next page. Do you remember this change? Instead, now it just endlessly scrolls.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a big change, right? And it plays on all sorts of different psychology that we have. And what we don't realize is that we are playing, anytime we're scrolling, we're playing against a machine. And that machine is not only data-driven, algorithmically driven. Now they're blending the two together into artificial intelligence. And so, okay, you're just scrolling, right? You're just browsing, hanging out. But really what's going on is, do you remember back in the day, there was this chess grandmaster. His name was Garry Kasparov, and he went and played chess against a computer.
Oh yeah, I do remember this.
Okay, good. I might be dating myself, or we might be dating
old, except for
okay. Yeah, right. Okay, so Deep Blue was the name of this supercomputer that Gary played against, and here he is. This is the game of antiquity, and it's beautiful and masterful, and it's this big kind of set warfare playing, and he lost. He lost to the machine. And this power asymmetry between you as a simple human versus artificial intelligence is what we're up against. And so as we scroll, we're being fed a whole lot of things. And we're not realizing that we are actually in a war for our attention. So when that comes, then you add any kind of predatory nature into that mix, suddenly there's all sorts of hooks and rabbit holes to go down. And so it's pretty tricky to say. We have to be way more cognizant that we are living in an experiment. And the experiment is this phone, this data portal we have in our pocket. And what does that really give us access to? It's good and bad. But we also have to recognize that there's going to be power asymmetries all over the place. And then there's bad actors, right? So predators. You
And
guys,
do you see a huge increase in predators using technology and those algorithms and the data that's available to then target specific women or girls?
well, here's the thing is that because it's all so hyper connected, um, we have unintended consequences of connectivity,
Mm.
right? And so we've opened up an amazing amount of private information, and we're able to be found. And so if I am in a population that is subject to exploitation, someone can use these powerful systems, search and data scraping and all these different things, to find a victim very quickly, very rapidly, and not only do that, but do it in mass. So most of the predators that we're aware of are playing a numbers game. They are trying to cultivate a huge list of targets, and so they're on a lot of different platforms. They're doing a lot of messaging. They've even automated some of that such that they finally get to what they want. And so, you know, if they can profile a victim, they'll dig deep. They'll dig deep and go for vulnerabilities. They'll understand. And this is kind of weird because, like, so I have a background in advertising and digital marketing, and man, we can find out a ton about you. We can, you know, we can find out, and then once you know, you see one of our things, we can retarget you and message to you and do all sorts of things. And a lot of these tools that are kind of marketing oriented are also the same techniques that a predator would use. And so it's kind of creepy, right? And so
It's super creepy, even coming from advertisers. Like,
right? Yeah.
recently I have this beautiful fluffy dog bed that I just am compelled to buy because I have this geriatric Great Dane. How does Instagram and Facebook know that that's exactly what I'm looking for? Like, it's
right. They're following you, right?
yeah, they know what I'm looking at.
I mean, like, I went on to like the Brooks shoe company website because I was looking for a new pair of running shoes, and I was like scrolling through them, and I didn't end up buying anything. But now when I go on Facebook, like every like 2 posts, there's like an ad from Brooks for me. Or when I go on Instagram, like the same thing, and they're like, "Oh, our new shoe," and I'm like, "Leave me alone."
Yes, yeah. And so they've placed a little, what is, you know, they've pixeled you or cookied you, and those are technical terms, but essentially that is created an identity for you that is allowed to be followed. And so I don't really want to cast all marketing and digital engagements as evil by any means, because they're really kind of cool. Like, being fully aware of that, I haven't opted out of retargeting and, you know, a number of those things, but because sometimes it's useful, because like, well, you know me, you're going to help me, you know, and that's the trade-off that we've made. But at the same time, vulnerable populations, you know, you get, you give a kid a smartphone and it changes, and it's a big deal because they you know, we talked about developmental psychology, right? And there's this ramp of physiology. And so what's the earliest are we giving kids phones? You know, what have you heard?
I mean, I asked, so my cousin is a newborn photographer, and she came over to do my baby's now almost 18 months, but almost 18 months ago, she came over to my house to do her newborn photographs. And she's got a daughter who's, I think she's about 12 now. And I mean, I was asking her, I was like, you know, I haven't even thought about this, but I was at a presentation recently and someone asked me, when do I give my child a cell phone? And on one hand, part of me is like, well, you know, I really like Find My Friends, you know, I have my husband's on it, like my family's on it, like I'm able to see where they're at. And like, you know, if my daughter, when she like is older and like I want to know where she's at, like I can see where she's at. But then at the same time, I was like, I don't want her just like on social media. I don't just want strangers contacting her, or she thinks has a really cool friend out in California and it turns out to be some like 50-year-old creep.
Yeah.
So I was like asking my cousin, I was like, what do you do? And she's like, well, she has a little friend. They're really good friends. Like, she had an old smartphone. She wanted to give it to my daughter. And so she's like, I told her yes, but she doesn't have service. She's not able to keep the phone with her all the time. She's like, I have it most of the time. And I have like screen mirroring on my laptop set up so that I see every message that comes into her. Like, I see every website.
There's a lot of smart things going on here, but it's also tricky because we've positioned it such that our kids are getting our older tech. I mean, that's almost every family, right? Oh, I need it. Like, my sister just texted me and was like, hey, do you have an old iPhone lying around? I'm ready for the 14-year-old to have, get connected. And I'm like, yes, but, administrating these systems, like, so in the Apple ecosystem, iOS, setting up your family is really important. Because then you can actually administrate screen time and some restrictions and things like that. But it gets really complicated really quick. So and if you're not willing to be fully immersed and take full ownership as a parent in that space, I think it gets dangerous. But then also, I've got a friend who, he's divorced, and there's different policies in different households, and that's crazy too. So when do you start?
I don't know. When do you start?
I get asked this all the time. And going back to kind of brain development, there's like these interesting peaks. Like, so right around 8 years old, there's kind of this trough of physical growth where the brain is developing, and then it goes into like 12-year-old, and then it goes puberty, right? But we also know that the frontal lobe isn't fully developed till we're like 25. And so it's like, when do we give them this unfettered access? And so I have a 5-year-old boy, an 8-year-old girl, and a 10-year-old girl. And man, 4 years ago, I kickstarted a phone. Like, so these are dumb phones. Okay. And all they do is text message, and it kind of has a minimal operating system. It's called the light phone. And guess what? They're still in their shrink wrap. Because I've learned that my 8 and 10-year-old, they're not ready. They're not ready. Now, then you switch into junior high and 13-year-olds and 14-year-olds.
Yep, I have a 13-year-old, and she's very different, and we have very different rules than my 10-year-old.
Yeah. So I think I would, as a parent, I'm going to put it off as long as possible, and then I'm going to go as low tech as possible right off the bat. Even to the point where, like, and they're going to probably hate on me for a while, but I'm going to drag my feet on connecting my girls till maybe 14, to be honest with you. And when I do, they're getting a dumb phone. So they're going to be able to text and maybe even no camera, interestingly enough.
I like that. Yeah, I like that concept. And I'm curious, my 13-year-old, we do Apple, so I have complete control over,
You're in a huge minority already by saying that you have complete control, because most people aren't administrating it from the family system that they have in place.
Oh yeah, no, I physically take her phone every day.
Okay, good.
Physically delete, block, or spawn, because although it's such a hard line. I mean, we are a divorced family, and luckily we have the same rules. Whether or not they get enforced the same is different, but I'm the bad cop always, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I'm curious what you can do as a parent. I mean, it's obviously an individual family decision when your child gets a smartphone.
Yeah.
What are some steps? I know for our 13-year-old, there's no defining features, like as far as her handle isn't her name, her password is symbols, letters, capitals, you know what I mean? Like all the different ways to protect that way. And then we
So
also,
I like what you're talking about is like, I would start with routine and say, hey, these are the opening and closing windows of phone. What we understand from school administrators and different things like that is that one of the biggest dangers is no bedtime.
oh,
And so anytime so like a check-in and a check-out of like a phone charging station that is communal and
yes.
there's transparency is a big deal. And so it's like, you know what, you don't need to check it first thing. I do want you to be connected, and I want to be able to connect with you and, you know where you are and have that kind of safety net. But, you don't need to wake up, roll over and check your feeds, right? No, get dressed, get ready for school, be a part of the family, and then check it out. And then also in the evening, that same kind of thing, saying, hey, it's time. And I've heard 10 p.m. is a really good kind of like teenager time for, shutting it down.
You know what's interesting is lately, because of the COVID crisis, like that's the only way these kids are connecting typically is FaceTime and group chats.
Mm-hmm.
But as every night, as I go through my 13-year-old's text messages, I notice a shift in the tone after 10 p.m. Like, and she has friends, I have her phone at 10 p.m., but she has friends on that group chat till 2 a.m.
Right.
And it progressively gets more dramatic and more, like, oh my God, it's an interesting thing I've just noticed recently that.
And you bring up the wild card, because there's always going to be, like there's, my 8-year-old's coming back to me. She's in 3rd grade and she's like, hey Dad, what does this mean? And I'm like, well, that's a TikTok dance, or she's saying something like, and I was like, you don't even know what that meme means, but you're replicating it in the 3rd grade. And I'm like, where did you find that out? And it's like, 1 or 2 kids have unfettered access interclass to a smartphone. And so it gets in to the social, into the culture there. And you're like, you're never going to be able to control that. But I commend you on saying that you're doing a ritual of, I'm going through the communication channels. It's really important, really important. That's good high level protection or adulting.
I really would like her to not have a phone, to not have Instagram, to not have any of it. But we tried to find this balance of, we trust her. And I keep telling her that over and over. I trust you. It's the world I don't trust. When it comes to you.
That's a really good line. And in my use with my girls especially, what I'm trying to do is just model behavior. Because I'm on Twitter. I've been on Twitter for like over a decade. Like I was on Facebook when you had to be invited with a college email. Like this is like I'm here, but I want them to see me using it healthfully, like, and so they sit with me and we browse. And they're like, what was that? And I was like, no, or like, hey, this is fun. Oh, and then we laugh. And so we TikTok. They use my account to TikTok. There's some parental TikTok features that I don't know if you're aware of.
There's, other than like a private account, I mean, tell us more. What are the...
So you're going to see a whole blossoming of stuff coming in around parental features. And it's weird because it's like, what level do you do it, right? Because you could say hardware level, and you could say software level, or operating system level, or app level. And, ideally you are kind of juggling all of them. So like on the home level, I would say, look at your hardware, your router, right? The thing that's giving you the wireless network. There's different routers out there that give you a lot of control, and that's a baseline level control, which is really cool.
And is that when people talk about turning off their Wi-Fi at 10?
Yeah.
So they're just cut off. Okay.
Yeah, and so you can just like, so I've liked a couple different systems. Circle by Disney is pretty good, and it's either built into your router or it's a separate little device, and it allows you to identify their device and turn it off, or set times and some filters, and that's kind of at that hardware level. I've got a EERO mesh network in my house, and it's got some of the same feature sets. There's a ton of different providers though, but like starting at the originating point of data is that's a really good level of control. Now that's tricky because if they have a cell plan, they've got two sources of the data, right? They've got the internet Wi-Fi, and then they've also got the cellular data. And so you're like, oh, okay, well, so again, you're never going to be able to block this. It's really more about teaching stewardship, but also giving them accountability and reviews such that they're going to be okay, that you're teaching them to make good choices.
Yes, and in turn, I feel like they're teaching me. I know, like what you talked about, how like you don't need to wake up and roll over and scroll. That's what I do. And my kids call me out on it constantly. And I appreciate it because I can't, preach it if I'm not practicing it, or I can, but they're going to call me on it. And it's same thing at meals. We have a basket that we put all the cell phones in so that when we eat and we're like engaged.
It's not this. Yeah.
Yeah. And they call me on it too. Like yesterday, I got up in the middle of the meal to return a text message and they were like, Mom. I'm like, true. You're right. 100% you're right. Put it down, be done. So I think we are modeling good behavior and teaching them, but also as adults, it's hard not to get sucked down the rabbit hole of scrolling and liking and engaging online, especially when we're all stuck at home with COVID.
And so the stay-at-home thing is a really good example of how great technology can be, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like we would be going crazy. I'm so proud of our teachers cranking out the content and engaging the kids online, and it's so good. And all of a sudden you can't say screen time's evil anymore, right? Because you're like, oh, thank you. Right? But so that's a really good example of how technology is neutral. It's not good or bad, it's just how you use it. And it's just like good, it's like people, like people are inherently powerful, and it's how they choose to channel that, and so it's like, and you just got to teach our kids that, it's like, people have a lot of capacity and a lot of capability, but Mio, you're a fighter, something can go sideways.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth, your experience is really amazing for the world to say, like, hey, there's a lot of capacity for good and evil out there. Where are we going to channel it? And it's really it's intense. It's intense. Okay, so let me give the adults a tech tip.
Okay.
Oh, good. I need.
So one of my most favorite things to do is, I was reading about, I know about this guy. His name's Tristan Harris, and he was a product manager at Google. Okay, and I think he was associated with Gmail. Okay, and do you guys have a Gmail account?
Yeah.
Right, kind of almost everyone does. And he's sitting here, and he's like, he's like a mid-20s, white, upper middle class, well-educated guy, and he's sitting there and he's looking around at the other people that are, managing this product, and he's like, they're all kind of the same. Interesting. And then he's like, you know what? They were making a decision to push out a message. And what he realized is that he was affecting millions of people's lives by being able to push a notification. like millions and millions. And he's like, wait a minute, that's an incredible power asymmetry that I have and am wielding. And am I being ethical about that? And so he ended up actually leaving Google because he was like, the ethics of this is deeply in question. And so coming back to advice to us as adults, my number one thing is go to your phone and turn off all notifications, all of them, and see what that does to your life.
And now just to walk the, I know I'm a millennial. I'm supposed to be like 100% tech savvy. I mean, like, if it can't be done from my phone, like, I generally struggle. But that being said, can you just walk me through turning off my notifications?
Totally. So let's take iOS, because there's a lot of us who are using that, and that's what I'm most familiar. But you can do this on both like Android and that. So you go into your settings.
Okay.
And you're looking, and depending on the version of the operating system you're using, okay, you could search for this by doing a quick pull down on a little search menu comes up. So that might be the easiest way to find it. But you're looking for the notification setting.
So I think I turned mine off, but I want to verify because it says show previews and then the answer is never.
Okay, so here's what you're finding is you're going to be surprised at how much agency of your life you've given away to all the apps that you've allowed to say, I will interrupt you on my own agenda. And you're like, wait a minute, how did these companies, how did these computer programs, how did these apps just steal hours of my day away by saying, hey, look at me. And you realize that you're Pavlovianly conditioned to respond, right? Bing, oh, bing, oh, right? And if we can turn off our notifications and then selectively, so I say, anytime you install something new, don't agree to the notifications.
Okay.
And turn and say, no, take your life back and say, I'm going to engage with this of my own free will and when I want to. Okay, so you can modify the levels of how you're notified, but you can also decide incrementally what you really deem valuable in your life. Like, so work emails, yeah, I'm gonna get a notification for that. But social apps, do I really need to be notified about my likes? Do I really need to be notified about activity of my friends? You know, like changing that paradigm of saying, I'm not going to be conditioned to respond on someone else's agenda, being like, you know what, I'm going to sit down, have some self-time, and I'm going to open up my social apps. And you know what, when you find that you have like 6 notifications in there that you weren't interrupted by for like the previous, half day, and you're like, now you're in control. Now you have the power. Now the asymmetry isn't, you're not, you're not a dog responding to a bell. And I think it's amazing how much that has changed my perspective, because then all of a sudden my stimulus response is slowed down and I have that space. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's where I need to be. And then, you can slow things down. The other thing that I found that was really important for me is that before so I've slowed down the notification stimulus response, but then now when I'm making a conscious choice to, be social, I'm saying, what's my priority? And so I open a meditation app or a religious app every time before I do social.
Oh, set the tone.
And it's like, and that's dramatically changed my usage. It's like, should I be reading ancient wisdom or should I be reading dank memes? What am I filling my brain with? And that's been really good for a dramatic behavior shift in my life. And so turn off your notifications, and then choose to consciously opt in with priority.
Well, you know what's weird that I found the habits that you've created and how hard it is to break those habits. So when I wanted to do screen-free Sundays because Facebook was just, I was just so upset constantly. And I ended up having to delete the app off my phone completely. Even though the notifications were off and it was like 4 screens away, I still, that habit that I was in during the week was so hard to break that I had to physically break my access to it so that I'd have to sit down at a desktop, which I never do unless I'm working. So maybe some people listening will have to physically get rid of their social media to break the habit and then to create space to, I love your idea of opening the meditation app first thing, just to set the tone and to be mindful and to bring it back in, and then you're engaging in a mindful way. I need to talk to my kids about that because I think that's something they could do.
It's the difference of self-care, right? So when, I work with a lot of therapists, and it's really great, but there's a lot of things that self-care isn't. And to be honest with you, most of social media isn't. Right. It's kind of mindless consumption. So back when social was kind of blossoming, there was a whole cohort of students that went through Stanford, and they took a class. They took a coursework from a Professor Fogg and it was called the Stanford Persuasive Technology Lab. And these became the founders of many of the apps that we know today, interestingly enough. And what they were doing was using technology and an understanding of psychology to really engage you, and again, that can go either way, right?
Yeah.
It's good or bad. I'm not gonna say that it's bad, but just to know that they're using a very full skill set to engage you, that, I don't think we think about that, and saying, hey, where's my agency? Where's my power? And where am I able to take back my power? Because if you realize how much, like you're getting yoinked, notification. What's one of the craziest things is, here's another little trick. Do you realize the power of the red notification icon?
Oh my goodness, yes. I can't stand it when my email has I can't stand it. I have to go and look at it so it goes away because it drives me nuts seeing those red notifications.
And you're like, oh man, it's 2. Oh, it has 3. Okay. So there's psychology to the color red. And it's like, oh, okay, let me clear that, right? I still am, I'm very conditioned for clearing my notification, like that. But again, it goes back to what apps am I allowing to have that badge, that red little badge, So on all my social apps, and I have a ton of them, I'm on every network, or whatever, but I turn off the badge. And so until
How do you do that?
So just in the notification settings in the app. So you're going to allow it to
go into the specific app.
Yeah. You're going to go in and you're going to say, you know what? It's that conscious engagement, right? And say, you know what? Don't show app badges, I believe it's called.
And this is under settings. So I'm going to do it on Facebook while we're online. So it's under settings and privacy.
So yeah. So you are in the operating system settings, not Facebook. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So go. It's the gear icon, right?
The what?
It's the gear icon for iOS. It's the settings app, and it's for the operating system. And then you're going into notifications, and then you're finding all these apps, right? And if you, let's see, let me just.
It's going to take me a while to get through all those.
I know, and it's crazy. So here's this list. There's an army of artificial intelligence trying to interrupt you. I mean, this is the list. This is who you're fighting against for your sanity or for peace of mind or for, you know what I mean? So you look at that list and you say, huh. And I'm in the Facebook settings and just turn off sounds, turn off badges. You know you're going to check Facebook, right? You just don't need to be.
Turn off sounds, turn off badges.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm, so like maybe I can, my Facebook settings right now are, I don't want to see Facebook notifications on the lock screen. That's not important. That's too much stimulus for me. I don't want to see them interrupt me with banners. So I only have notification center clicked. And so that will, I could scroll through that on my time, on my choice.
Okay, so you uncheck banners and uncheck lock screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the main thing is turning off badges. And that's crazy. So here's a little experiment. This gets a little technical, but one of the things you can do in iOS, if you're getting really stimulated, you can turn it off color. And this is kind of a hack, but like you can set it so it's in some of the accessibility settings, but I turn it to grayscale, and then all of a sudden those red badges aren't red anymore, right? They're
So is that your whole screen goes grayscale?
Yeah. And that might be one of those steps, that like instead of like deleting everything, maybe that's enough. You'll realize how much the color and the psychology engages you in saying, whoa, slow this down, and say, you get it. So in essence, I would, like, I don't want to so we've been talking a lot about power asymmetry, and I think relevant to the podcast, I think we probably need to talk a little bit more about keeping our kids safe, and the hard answer, it's a hard answer, but the main thing is that be involved, have a ritual, have a physical ritual, have a review ritual, and if your kid is on a social network, you are too, and you are friends with them.
And what about when, my kids are, they're still babies. My oldest is 5. But as like my kids get older and they want to start posting pictures on social media, are there any tips of things that they should not post? Like, I don't know, just the number on your house, or I don't know. Are there any tips like that you can give as well? Or do those things not even really matter?
Well, so here's the trick. Here's the balance. Your digital footprint exists as soon as you're there. Okay. And, there's creepy things like you exist on Facebook, whether you want to or not. Have you heard of this?
Yeah.
Okay. Facebook actually has a shadow profile of you. And I know this is crazy, right? Because like, all your friends who just like kind of click through and said, yeah, sure, add my contacts, right? Well, Mio's in 5 people's phones, right? And Facebook just built a shadow profile of someone named Mio. Now it might connect it with your real profile, but you might not exist on Facebook. You still do, and so I know. And so it's like this kind of pervasive panopticon world, it's kind of scary, but so how can you protect yourself? I love posting pictures of my kids. Some people don't show their kids' faces. Some people don't reference their kids by name. Only will do an initial. I think those are really good safe practices if you're feeling vulnerable. So, don't reference their names until, and if you can delay creating a digital profile for them, then there won't be a shadow profile for them until you are ready. And then at that point, safe practices. Like I like saying like, do you use your real name or not? So you mentioned that you use like kind of a pseudonym, right? I'm actually a big fan of using their real name. Anybody using their real name, because I believe it kind of builds an integrity, accountability piece, personal brand kind of thing, So like, if I'm way more willing to post something lame as anonymous than I am as.
Oh yeah, I can totally see that. Yeah, I mean her account is parts of her name.
Okay. So, I mean, so your personal brand is really tricky, but then also you have to be careful. Like on Instagram, there's a whole concept called your Finsta, your fake Insta. Have you heard of this?
Well, I've got trolls in my DMs that would never say shit to my face.
Right,
So.
right. Yeah, exactly. So the Finsta thing is that was kind of a thing maybe a couple of years ago with a lot of teenagers, is that they'd have their Instagram and then they'd go into the settings and they'd switch accounts, and it's their Finstagram where they're talking crap and they're being nasty and bullying and, hiding behind that anonymity. And so again, it's like, personal integrity versus safety. So I guess my whole thing is teaching capability rather than sheltering them and shielding them, so, hey, recognize that, never give out your address, never give out, if the main thing is just messaging, right? Predators, they're going to groom, and that's the whole profile. Say, if you don't know this person in real life, no chance. Okay, because you really don't know if it's just some psycho weird guy on the East Coast grooming, right? And then also making it okay to talk about anything that makes them feel uncomfortable.
And what about, so my youngest brother, all my siblings are married except my youngest brother.
Uh-huh.
And he's in college right now, and he lives in an apartment, with some other guys. And one of his guy friends, he's on Tinder or whatever the dating apps are. And he's always like bringing girls back to the apartment, all this kind of stuff. And my brother, he's in a lot of like male dominated classes. He switched his major a few times. I can't exactly remember. I feel like it's some kind of.
And that's okay. Just kidding.
I'll ask him again. It just changes rather often, so it's hard for me to keep on top of it. But he was talking to me the other day, and he's like, oh yeah, he's like, I tried it, but he's like, you just never know what you're gonna get, and their profile pictures are so much different. He's like, but then at the same time, like I go to my classes and they're mostly guys, and it's really hard to meet people. And he's like, I'm like stuck kind of in between, because on one hand, I want to meet girls, like I want to, like have fun, I want to go on dates, like I'd like to have a relationship, but at the same time, like I don't, I want to know what I'm getting. So what about for like the people in those kinds of situations? Are dating apps, how dangerous are dating apps?
Well, that is like a whole episode. The psychology and the dramatic cultural shift of dating apps is literally changing the fabric of our society. So statistically, you used to marry someone who lived within a 3-mile radius of you. And,
Really?
yeah. And if you look back at that, like think about your parents, and then think about maybe there's a lot of that's just totally torn apart. So there's the single scene, which is really complex because it gets Netflix and chill really quick, and that's the quick hookup. But then some of the psychology research is saying is that people are not seeking out relationships as much. And then there's the whole other side of things of being a divorcee on social dating apps, and that is cray as well.
I refuse. I won't do it. All my friends are like, get on Bumble, get on Tinder, I'm like, no.
It can be really healthy, but it can also, like, a lot of my divorced friends are like, they're like, whoa. And this is one of the principles of cyber psychology, as it's kind of cheesily termed, is things escalate. Things escalate really quick, right? And it's like, hey, hi, hey, pick, like, what? Like what? And that's just, so there's a whole lot of escalation and safety things. So a lot of the dating apps are recognizing some of the stalkerish behavior dangers. And so I would really encourage most people, I think it's healthy. I think it's healthy to connect, and it's human nature to want companionship and connection in that space, but use some of the safety protocols in there. So like meet at public places.
Yeah.
In some of these apps, you're being able to set up point of contact, so you can actually quickly say, creeping me out. There's an app that I actually really like. In general, I gotta remember the name of it. There's an app called Parachute, and this is an interesting app that basically is an emergency button on your phone. And so you can set it up such that, so Parachute, you're here, and if you're feeling creepy, you just hit the Parachute button, and it's going to broadcast your location, and it's going to text people, and it's going to do a number of things, and it starts audio recording. Which is
love that.
Really cool, right? So like, and there's multiple versions of this out there on different platforms, different names, but this is the one that I've kind of looked into for some of the personal safety stuff.
And this is like for when you like have a live meeting, like when you go to meet that person in real life, or
yeah. Well, so there's kind of the dating things, but even if you're like Elizabeth, if you're like, gosh, I'm going to go to a downtown business meeting, right? Before I get out of my locked car, I'm going to open up my safety app. And if I'm uncomfortable, boom, and that is just like all sorts of reassurance that gives a whole lot of data to people you love and trust, and can be there for you as backup. So we can be smart.
And technology can serve a positive purpose.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm going to download that right now.
Yeah, check it out. I'm impressed how simple but comprehensive that particular app is, and there's a couple of different versions.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to recommend hardware or software or anything, because there's endless. It's spawning endless versions, and so what we really end up needing to talk about is the principles. So dating, man, that's that would be a good episode.
All right, the next time.
Yeah. So, but I think know, be careful, love your people, and just simple things like what, I'm never gonna make a phone interaction more important than an in-person interaction. Like making that conscious decision of being like, what, I'm going to recognize proximity, and I'm going to, just like, so like the haunting story I have. This was a good reminder. My wife and I put the kids to bed, and we're like sitting on the couch, and we're just watching we're scrolling our feeds, right? Sitting next to each other, scrolling our feeds. Okay. I didn't realize how sad that is. Okay. That's really sad. It's especially like couples in bed, like on their phones, laying opposite way, like, oh, it's sad. And so we're sitting there and we're both in our feeds, and our little girl, she must have been 6 or 7 at the time. And she whispers from the top of the stairs. And it's funny because we weren't really consciously aware of it. She started saying, phone people. We're like, huh? Phone people. What? Phone people. And like we look up there and she just giggles and laughs. And you're like, get out of here. You go to bed. We put you down already. But then we kind of looked at each other and we're like, oh my gosh, we're phone people. We're phone zombies. you know, and that, so we've modified behavior.
Yes, modeling good behavior is so key, and then in turn they call you on it too. It's very, can be a healthy thing.
You know, a teacher of teachers, my kids go to a Waldorf school, and it's really kind of like organic or crunchy, or, you know, just kind of wonderfully old school. And they've encouraged us to do 0 screens. And that was, it was nice to have that social reinforcement to like declutter our brains. But I was talking to a Waldorf teacher of Waldorf teachers, a beautiful man, and he said the best thing you can do, if you want your kids to do something and love something, your kids need to see you doing it for at least 20 minutes a day. And that's the modeling principle that I find the most true. So if my kids are seeing me reading a book, you know, I don't have to constantly entertain them. They don't, you know, like that, but they're going to be like, you know what? I think I'm going to follow that, model that, you know? So if they see you doing something for 20 minutes, like exercise, you know, reading something that's not scrollable, you know, like all these things, then we're doing our job. Then we're modeling correctly. So
I think we're out of time for today, but you have been awesome. And I definitely want to have another episode where we talk about I'm not going to say horrors of online dating, but the precautions that we can take.
You know, and I think another one, like, so we could talk a lot about bullying. We could talk a lot about the crazy world of online dating. I think, and then we could talk a lot about the tenets of cyber psychology, and that kind of leads almost into political realms, where how things are so intense these days. And I think we can temper those and be better people, better society.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to talk to you about each of those topics. So everyone who's watching, stay tuned, because you're going to see this man again, Chris, many times.
Oh no.
And just some reminders. I mean, kind of the things that I've gathered as we are ending this episode. I mean, go into your phone settings, turn off your notifications, see what freedom, experiment with it, see how much extra time you have in your life. Make sure you're keeping those levels of communication open with your kids. And if they're on social media, you're on that social media. You're watching what they're posting. And I mean, I love what Mio's brought to the conversation today about, having like this solid family time, like dinner time. You put your phones in a basket, or what Chris suggested, at the communal charging station, and you set those parameters in your life and see how that changes. Just the energy, I think, in your life, and what opens up and what frees up, and when you choose to make that social interaction, if it's more impactful and more meaningful to you, instead of being the puppy dog and be like, oh my goodness, I have a notification, I have to go check it out right now. Yeah. I mean, as we were sitting here talking, I turned off my notifications. So just a few thoughts that maybe you should try out and see how it changes, how it affects your life. And with that being said, I want to say thank you, Chris. Thank you, Mio, for everything that you shared today. I know I certainly was more of a listener today, but I gained so much, and I appreciate it all so much. And so for everyone tuning in today, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next time on the next episode. Bye-bye.